Hi, my name is Precious Bhengu, and today I'll be delivering an official speech about gender-based violence under the Mary Memela Foundation. So we have Miss Simtembile Ele and Mr. Welcome Kize, Mrs. Elo Dlamini, and other Mary Memela Foundation members. Not like from Food by Foodies, ladies and gentlemen, good day to you all. Thank you for joining us this morning to mark the first of the series of the event to commemorate the passing of Gogo, Mary Memela, and to debate social issues. Today the social issue that we will tackle is gender-based violence as it's grown rapidly in South Africa. Gender-based violence is the most cruel expression of gender inequality in society. It is first and foremost a violation of human rights and threatening issues to cut across culture, wealth, race, age, and sexual orientation. Gender-based violence affects mostly women, but it does not mean that it does not affect men and boys. Gender-based violence affects gender justice because it continues the oppression of women and girls and hindering democratic development. If women and girls are not safe, then they cannot participate well in development of their society. They cannot unleash their full potential if they are oppressed, and if they feel unsafe because they will always be cautious. They cannot be full citizens. As I've said before, gender-based violence is a violation of one's human rights, and this is being reflected on one of many human rights, and this one of many treaties, one of them being the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Gender-based violence is something that can be presented, and one would have to look into root causes of such form of brutality aimed at women and children of South Africa. One of the many root causes of gender-based violence is gender inequality, where men feel that they are superior than women. This is a trend that has been around for centuries, and if we do not tackle it now, it will go on for centuries more. Putting an end to gender-based violence and that threatens the security of women and children should be a priority for South African government. But this responsibility should not solely rest with the government, but also should rest between me and you. For us to not look away and say it is none of our business. Such issues should be addressed on ground level, and that is that the community should really behind women and ensure their safety. God gave men physical power when compared to women, and so men should use that power to protect women and children and not brutalize the powerless and vulnerable children who depend on them for their safety. That is a transformation that is needed in society where men use their power to protect and not brutalize women. The only time that we will win the fight against gender-based violence will be when gender inequality is achieved, when women and men, boys and girls are offered the same rights and opportunities in life, when they are given power to share their lives and to contribute equally to society, and for them to have as much relevance to society as others regardless of their sexual orientation. We should do away with ancient forms and embrace the new norms where women are treated equally with men. We embrace the rapid change of technology, and now as we look into the fourth industrial revolution, let us not get stuck in the past. Let us transform the way we see gender relations too and embrace equality just like we embrace the fourth industrial revolution. Due to the fact that victims of gender-based violence as are women, one finds that the term violence against women is mostly used, not undermining the fact that some men also fall victims of gender-based violence. But what we found is that brutality is experienced by women. Women can be perpetrators too and can inflict harm to men as much as they also inflict harm on women, but that's a debate for another day. Women and girls are associated with weaknesses, inferiority, and victimization, and such stereotypes perpetuate gender-based violence because women are seen as not being able to defend themselves if they are to be attacked. As I've said before, men and boys can become victims of gender-based violence, and when they do, they are punished and they are thought of being weak. This is because men are thought to be able to defend themselves, and so they should not fall victims, but some of them do. So this is not about which gender is better than the other, but it is about how can we solve this issue that not only affects women, but also affects men too. An ineffective criminal justice system is failing us as women and men who become victims of gender-based violence. The criminal justice system needs to have in place harsh sentences for those found guilty of gender-based violence. gender-based violence on women and children, and even on men, because some of them become victims too. Now let's talk about the life cycle of gender-based violence, because it comes in different forms, shapes, and norms, and can last for long-term and short-term in a person's life. Some people experience gender-based violence in multiple occasions, which can be from childhood to adulthood to an old age. The most severe forms of gender-based violence are not the only forms that are hurtful, but also those that occur on a daily basis throughout a person's life. As infancy, little girls face being sexually abused, while little boys face being physically abused. At childhood, girls face being forced into forced marriage, and boys face being in domestic violence that is inflicted either on them or their parents. As adolescents, little girls are faced with being human trafficked into sex trade, and boys are faced with forced recruitment into child labor. At adulthood, girls are faced with sexual harassment in the workplace, and boys are faced with gang violence. And at an old age, women are faced with domestic violence, and men are faced with elder abuse due to their frail health. Gender-based violence occurs in different places, not only at home, but also at school, workplace, and even in parks. Gender-based violence can be either random, whereby the victim does not know the perpetrator, or it can be repeated and systematic. Systematic, whereby the victim knows the perpetrator and the violence occurs repeatedly at home. Gender-based violence knows no race, religion, economic status, or sexual orientation. It is cruel, and those who fall prey are those who are vulnerable because they cannot defend themselves if they were to be victims. In most cases, the vulnerable group include women, children, refugees, immigrants, LGBTI+ persons, minority groups, and disabled, the elderly, and women in prostitution industry. Gender, as I've said before, comes in different shapes and forms, and by mentioning the few that I will mention just now does not undermine other forms of gender-based violence and the entity they have. Domestic violence is the most common form of gender-based violence. It is the most common form of gender-based violence. Children who are exposed to domestic violence, whereby they witness their parents being abused by their father, become indirectly affected by this experience, and in some cases, they find themselves being perpetrators because of the effects of what they were exposed to growing up. In many legal frameworks, domestic rape, emotional abuse, and economic abuse are not considered acts of criminality. Domestic violence is condemned by many societies, but in some cases, they feel that such matters are private matters that they wish not to get involved into. In some cases of domestic violence, intervention is needed and could save a life, so as society, we should intervene when we find that domestic violence is taking place. Sexual violence by non-partners includes sexual harassment, assault, rape, and gang rape. Statistics by the World Health Organization show that 7% of women in the world have experienced sexual violence by persons who they do not have intimate relationships with. Gang rape is one of the most brutal crimes, and in most cases, women and children are affected. Men and boys also fall victims of gang rape. African traditional practices always play a role in gender-based violence. Not all, but some of them. One of the many harmful African traditional practices is that of female genital mutilation. This form of gender-based violence occurs in sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East, and it is often mostly carried out by traditional personnel and not by medical doctors. Out of the 29 countries where female genital mutilation occurs, half of those countries practice this tradition on girls at the age of 5 years. The other half of the 29 countries practice this tradition on girls at the age of 5 to 14. We should do away with tradition and religion that uses gender-based violence to justify their beliefs in the name of any traditional ancestry or God. The lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex community become victims of gender-based violence and are highly discriminated upon worldwide. In 76 countries, belonging to the LGBTI community is a crime, and in 10 countries, people of LGBTI community face life imprisonment and sometimes execution. Such a crime is what we call the hate crime because it is literally just driven by hate. It is appealing that hate is enough to lead to imprisonment or execution. In a world where we embrace the development of technology, we fail to embrace our own people as they are. Yet we are still stuck in ancient ideologies that continue to oppress us as women. In most cases, you will find that people of the LGBTI community face what is called corrective rape, where men rape a LGBTI community members with the futile idea that they will be corrected because the path that they choose is not normal. In a civilized and well-structured society, but there are those who still act uncivilized by harassing members of the LGBTI community. Again, we embrace the fourth industrial revolution, but we fail to embrace our brothers and sisters by accepting them for who they are. Now, let us address the issue of gender-based violence because as much as we can put the blame on a certain group of people by inflicting harm on others, we must come up with a way to address this block. Addressing gender-based violence is a development goal and addressing gender-based violence is a development goal and on its own, and countries should adopt and work on so that it does not occur in the future. We should not shy away from the fact that gender-based violence is a human rights issue. Due to the fact that it violates one's human rights, it violates one's human rights. It does that by taking away life, and everyone has a right to life and a right to safety, regardless of their sexual orientation. This is because human rights are not biased. They know no sexual orientation. Everyone has the same rights, and no one should infringe on the next person's rights. As a society, we should respect the next person's human rights. As a society, we should respect the next person's right to life, safety, sexual orientation, and sexual identity that they choose. This responsibility should not only rest with the South African government, but it should rest between me and you. Countries should transform their social and cultural practices and embrace the new norms and style of living as we are now living in the 21st century. We are civilized and we know the difference between what is wrong and what is right. Gender-based violence contributes to the spread of HIV, and if we do not tackle this issue, then HIV will spread further like wildfire. The way in which gender-based violence contributes to the spread of HIV/AIDS is through both sex. Rape does not only take away the dignity of a person, but it also exposes them to a risk of contracting HIV and AIDS. This can then lead to a woman not getting tested for HIV and AIDS due to the stigma attached to people that have HIV. The fear of knowing your status is one of the biggest issues because if you know your status, then you are able to protect the next person. Gender-based violence is a security threat and it prevents peace. It's a security threat because it strips away the safety of women. In South Africa, women are being slaughtered in the hands of men on a daily basis, and some of them find themselves being victims of rape. This takes their security and peace because these acts are becoming a habit and they are severely brutal. The right to safety of anyone, regardless of their gender, is an important right. Taking away these basic rights means that women cannot fully participate and become active citizens. As women, we should be engaged with, protected, empowered. This will ensure sustainable peace and development. There are solutions to almost every problem, and I would outline the solutions to gender-based violence. One of these solutions is simply to prevent gender-based violence from happening from the first place, and this should be the key priority. Gender-based violence cannot be treated in isolation because it is linked with gender inequality, gender roles, traditional customs, and so on. There should be a shift in focus, seeing women as survivors, agents of change, instead of seeing them as victims because women are stronger than that. Women should be economically empowered so that they can stand on their own and for them to be able to provide for themselves without having to be dependent on men. Effort should be made to ensure that women and girls are well educated because education is the key to success. This will enable them to notice an abusive relationship at its early stages and for them to be able to walk away as soon as possible. Efforts to educate girls and boys at their adolescent stage about sex education and how to treat women and the transition of HIV and AIDS. include men too as survivors of gender-based violence, because they too experience gender-based violence, even though such cases are not reported due to the fear of being stigmatized, as some of them belong to the LGBTI community. As South Africans, let us transform our what we see as normal and the way we behave when it comes to treating women. These are the gender stereotypes that are shaped and modeled in our minds from a young age by the institutions such as schools, churches, cultures, traditions, and in some cases, cults. The South African government should strengthen laws around the issue of gender-based violence. The criminal justice system of this country should be harsh on those found guilty of gender-based violence and rehabilitate them, because such behavior is not normal. There should be efforts made to ensure that women are able to buy land of their own without having to have men to sign on their behalf. This will ensure that women become independent enough to start their own household and abandon abusive relationships. The criminal justice system should be strengthened so that it does not fail survivors of gender-based violence. This is because the criminal justice system is the only system that upholds the law, and when the police work together with the courts and the correctional services, then perpetrators will be held accountable. There should be an improvement of response services for survivors of gender-based violence. Response should be based on the survivor's needs and safety. If a woman reports that her husband is abusing her, there should be quick response by the police and the community, because the police need the community when it comes to a problem that is within the community. And I would like to close off with this last statement, that gender-based violence is a problem for us all, men and women. As a community, we should put an end to gender-based violence and assist the police wherever they need assistance when it comes to arresting perpetrators. If a survivor of gender-based violence does not have the strength because of trauma, they might choose to not pursue justice, but this is where the community has to intervene and support the survivor and ensure that those responsible face the full might of the law. Correctional facilities should also rehabilitate perpetrators so that they cannot repeat the same offense, and this will decrease gender-based violence because they will be deterred from doing this again. I hope that from this day onwards we will be active citizens by reporting acts of gender-based violence, and for men to use their power and strength to protect, love and save the beautiful women of this world. God bless women, and thank you all.